Now let's talk about Onstart. When the activity enters the started state, the system invokes this callback. You must remember that all these methods are being invoked by the system itself and you don't have any say in it as a developer. But like I said earlier, because you know that these methods are being called at a particular stage, you can perform the actions that you want your app to perform. There's this onStart event, which is basically an enum in Java that Android has provided. You can use these enums to provide the information about this event having been executed. After the onStart, after you perform the actions that you perform in onStart, you can also perform certain actions in onResume because it is called just after onStart. It is denoted by onResume event, and when an interruptive event occurs, the activity enters the pause state and the system invokes the onPause callback. So after onResume, in case there is an interruptive event, the user is using the app and the phone calls comes in, then that's called an interruptive event, and at that point in time the onPause method will be called. If the activity returns to the resumed state from the paused state, the system once again calls the onResume method, and I would like you to revisit this because this is actually the holy grail of what all is happening in activities when it comes to Android. So after after onResume activity is running, and onPause is called when there is an interruption, and in case after onPause the user is again coming back to the activity, probably it could be a phone call, and after that if the user returns to the same app, then onResume is again called, right? Now there could be a debatable thing going on here wherein you might ask, when is onPause called and when is onStop called, as in what is it that decides what will how do you know that onStop will not be called and the user will return to the activity just after onPause? Now that's quite debatable. This all depends upon the kind of app you're working on. If there is a lot of data that you want to store, then you might want to not have onPause. Then you might not want to rely completely on onPause. You might want to assume that the onStop will be called and I will be saving the data here, and then onRestart would be called. After that onStart would be called. So this all depends upon the kind of app that you're working in, and there is no hard and fast rule as to what will not be called and what will be called. If the activity returns to the resumed state, we have already discussed this. So here is an example of lifecycle aware component that accesses the camera when the component receives the onResume event. So here the user has returned back to the same activity, and on lifecycle event onResume is being called, and we are returning the get camera here. The code above initializes the camera once the Lifecycle Observer receives the onResume event. So Lifecycle event observer is nothing but an interface, because implements is here. It basically is used to implement its methods. So there is a method called onLifecycle event which you can use the method is initialize camera here, and these are different cases which you can utilize through this interface depending upon your requirement. So the code above initializes the camera once the Lifecycle Observer receives the onResume event. In multi-window mode, however, your activity may be fully visible even when it is in pause state. For example, when the user is in multi-window mode. Now multi-window mode is something which has come up only after NuGet, and earlier this facility was not there officially by Android, although some vendors like Samsung had implemented this facility, but it was not officially provided by Android. It has only been provided by Android after NuGet. Now we need to discuss this. For example, when the user is in multi-window mode and taps the other window that does not contain your activity will be moved to pause state. So I want you guys to utilize all these developer docs whenever you are working on any app, because of simple example like this. Multi-window mode is something which is very particular. It has to be handled in a particular way, and only Android developer docs can provide you that information how to actually handle it. If you want the camera active only when the app is resumed, visible and active in the foreground, then initialize the camera on after the onResume event demonstrated above. There are different phases where you want to use the camera as and when required. We will be touching upon multi-window support later, but not right now. After this, we have the OnPause method. OnPause method, as you know, is called when you have activities running and there's an interruption. The system calls this method as the first indication that the user is leaving your activity, though it does not always mean the activity is being destroyed. It indicates that the activity is no longer in the foreground, though it may still be visible if the user is in multi-window mode. So earlier we used to safely say that if the user if the OnPause method is being called, then you can say that the activity is no more even visible to the user. But now it is no more the case. Now when you have multi-window mode, the user might have started interacting with another app through multi-window mode, and your app might still be visible, right? So these are the details that you need to keep in mind now. Use the OnPause method to pause or adjust operations that should not continue or should continue in moderation while the activity is in the pause state. Now here is one of the things that is quite debatable. How do you decide what is moderate, right? Now this is something which comes with experience. If you know that let's say you are making an Android game, and the user is playing your game in a multi-window mode. In that case, the moment they decide to move to some other app through multi-window mode and your app is still visible, now in that case you know that you don't want your user to, your user is not going to play your game because they are already being involved in some other app. In that case, what you can decide is that you would freeze your game as of now, because the user is paying their attention somewhere else, and you will dim the lighting of your game, and you might also want to put a small pause sign out there on the multi-window mode, because that's the kind of information you want to provide your user, that you have paused the game because they are paying attention to something else right now. So this is something which you have to learn with experience and while practicing the Android development. Now there are several reasons why an activity may enter this state. For example, some event interrupt app execution, and in Android 7.0 or higher, multiple apps run in multi-window mode. Because only one of the apps has focus at any time, the system pauses all other apps, right? A new semi-transparent activity such as dialog opens. As long as the activity is still partially visible but not in focus, it remains paused. So these are the 3 or 4 cases which you can realize as you are developing your Android apps, wherein the OnPause method will be called. Again, we have Lifecycle Observer here. It's an interface recently introduced, which lets you to have it lets you watch over the events that are happening in your app, and how you can I'm not sure why is it not available right now. Probably some kind of development that is going on at the back end. It's not available. So that's about on resume and on pause. Now let's talk about on stop and the other topics in our next video.